For those of you who weren't here last week, what we're doing is we're studying the book of Revelation. And not to go and just, talk about the entire lesson last week, but just give you a little quick glimpse of what we talked about last week. Last week we looked a little bit about what the book of Revelation is. A lot of times people have kind of wrong views of what the book of Revelation is starting out with, and if you have a wrong view of something starting out with, then it's going to be hard to, get it, a good start from there. And it all goes back to when the title of the book of Revelation. I mean, it is the revelation of Jesus Christ, and some people miscompute or misunderstand that, and especially when you think about the word apocalypse. And when people start to hear the word apocalypse, they start to think about all the bad things that go on with the end of time and everything like that. But the book of Revelation is called the apocalypse, not because of the bad stuff that goes on at the end of times, even though that's involved in it, but instead it's called the revelation of Jesus Christ, because this is what Jesus Christ is revealing to John to write to the 7 churches of Asia Minor about the things that are now and the things that are of the end. And so those are some of the things that we looked at last week. We saw that John was on this island of Patmos, and he was there as a prisoner because of Jesus Christ. He was in the Spirit in the Lord's day, and he heard a sound behind him. So he turned around, he looked, and he saw this vision of Jesus Christ, and he was told to write what he saw, send it to these 7 churches, the things that were now and the things that were what is to come later. And so that's exactly what he does. And so the book of Revelation is this series of visions that John receives that the Lord gave to him, and he writes these things down, and that's what it's all about. Now, one thing that we looked at last week is we looked at how it says, in fact, if you want to open up to chapter 1 of Revelation. That's a good place to start, isn't it? All right, so one thing that you notice in verse number 11 of chapter 1, and also in verse number 19 of chapter 1, is he says this. In verse number 11, he says, write on a scroll what you see and send it to the 7 churches, to Ephesus, Smyrna, Pergamon, Thyatira, Sardis, Philadelphia, and Laodicea. And then in verse number 19, he comes back to it and says, write therefore what you have seen, what is now, and what will take place later. And so from that, in verse number 19, that designation of what is now and what is later, we kind of see what's going on with this. And that is, we've got now, and then we've got what is going to be later on, which is the rest of the book. But chapters 2 and 3 really are these letters of the 7 letters to the 7 churches of Asia Minor. And that's kind of what we're going to be talking about tonight, is what these letters are. If you remember, I talked about last week how the book of Revelation is these 7 letters, 7 seals, 7 trumpets, and 7 bowls or 7 vials. And everything else is kind of based and anchored around that. And so, if we can get through looking at chapters 2 and 3 tonight, then we'll do it. If we can't get done with it, if we get bogged down, we'll just keep on going at our own speed. Okay? All right. Anybody got any questions or comments from what we talked about last week? Yes, sir.
I'm just curious about the number 7.
Yes.
I noticed that, that's pretty prevalent throughout not just in Revelation, but throughout the Bible. I was wondering if there was any correlation as why it's number 7 all the time. Why not 8 or 6?
Okay. Well, one reason why 7 is significant is because the Lord created the earth in 6 days and he rested on the 7th. And so from that designation of 7, you do see the number 7 pop up quite frequently in Scripture. And a lot of times when you see the number 7 pop up in Scripture, it does talk about a divine completion. Like, for example, with the earth and the creation of the earth, everything took 6 days, and then that seventh day, it was a divine completion where God rested. And so here we've got these 7 churches, 7 bowls, 7 trumpets, 7 bowls, or 7 seals, 7 bowls, 7 trumpets. We've also got 7 thunders. We've got 7 signs. We've got a bunch of 7s. We've got 7 spirits. We've got 7 candlesticks. There's, I think, maybe I'm wrong about this, but I think I read something about there's like 52 different references of 7 in the book of Revelation.
I think that's just a number that God chose for.
Well, the reason why I chose it is because of creation. So, when you see that number 7 and you see it in a symbolic sense, that's the meaning of it, is, kind of a divine completion. But just because you see the number 7 in other places in the Bible, it doesn't necessarily mean anything. There's sometimes that people say, oh, well, anytime you see the number 7, it's this. Well, no, it really isn't, Anytime you see the number 3, it's, well, not necessarily. It's kind of like, it's 7 because it's not 8, and it's not 6, and it's not 9, and it's not 5. Yeah.
A little bit off topic, but I've always heard that the number 40 in the Bible is like the number of change. Like that's the number God uses whenever there's a significant change. Like he gave Nineveh 40 days and 40 days of rain and
I don't know about change, maybe. I mean, we've got a lot of different 40s in the Bible too. Him giving Nineveh. We've got Moses up on Mount Sinai, 40 days. We've got, what's that?
40 days.
40 years.
For 40 years.
Yeah.
Did
40
Jesus
years.
fast for 40 days?
Yep, Jesus fasted for 40 years. There was
40 days.
What that?
40 days. You said he fasted for 40 years.
Man, that was a long time.
He didn't even live that long.
40 days of rain fell upon the earth, right? Am I right about that? Yeah. So we got a lot of different 40s in the Bible too. I don't know about
all the things you mentioned were change.
well, okay.
Major change.
All
I
right.
have something to comment on this. Like, if 7 is like the whole complete number, I guess like at the end of like all of these 7s, it's like a completion of the end times, right?
Well, get your mind off of end time, and if you get your mind back on God's revelation, then I think it makes a little bit more sense.
Okay.
And that it's a
God's
completion
revelation
of
to us.
what God is trying to reveal.
Okay.
Okay?
Yeah.
Instead of change, would like a renewal be good? Like change, or like almost like a rebirth kind of change. I'm thinking back to some of those examples, especially 40 days of rain on the earth, but all of them kind of seem to fit that theme.
Well, I'm kind of thinking that it's also a completion as well,
Because
and that
Moses
is like,
needed
for
to be
example,
prepared.
Jesus fasting in the desert for 40 days. It's I guess maybe you could think of that as a change, because Jesus after that began his earthly ministry, and so it was a change of his private life to being in the public eye. So yeah, maybe so.
It's like the start. It's like the start of something new. That's what I mean.
Yeah.
By rebirth.
Same with Moses. He prepared for 40 years and then had a change into the leadership
Okay.
of Israel.
Yeah, I can see that.
And when
I've just never thought about it that way.
Wait,
He went away for 40 years before God brought him
I
back
thought
to.
you were talking about Israel wandering through the desert.
Well, there's another
No,
40.
there-
We didn't
yeah,
even
it's
talk
two
about
I
it.
thought
Yeah.
that's what you were talking about to begin
Well-
with. And when Israel's wandering through the desert for 40 years, that was definitely a rebirth or a
Yeah.
renewal of the people.
But Moses went away for 40 years before God allowed him to lead the Israelites out of Egypt.
Yeah. Was he on the mount for 40 days?
Moses?
yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, that's what I thought too.
That's
And then the
that's
Ten
another-
Commandments.
That's another
yeah.
one that's God starting his people, giving him
Give him the laws.
giving him the law.
Yeah.
And when he came back down, there was a whole lot of change.
Well,
Yeah, and not in
Yeah.
a good way.
no, not what God wanted either. Okay. All right.
It's interesting.
So,
I've never thought about the 40 before. All the 40.
yeah. I mean, there are things in the Bible that pop up, numbers in the Bible that pop up symbolically. We do have the number 7. We've got the number 3. We've got 40. We've got 6, which is a number of humanity, because man was created on the 6th day. We've got.
3.
Oh,
shows up a lot.
I thought I said 3, but yeah, it's a divine number because of the Trinity. 12, yeah,
12
and 10
times.
too.
Wow.
So, so there are numbers that pop up, but again, just because you see a number in the Bible, it doesn't necessarily have any significance to it, unless it is in a passage where it's on center stage, and so, if you've got 10 virgins, in the parable of the 10 virgins, the 10 individual virgins doesn't necessarily mean anything. So there's going to be some people who want to really make that parable run on all fours and run away, because they want to make the number 10 so significant and special. And it's just kind of like, well, there is 10, but that's not the point to what the parable is.
Number,
yeah,
and it still would have been the same parable.
right.
I think we also need to be careful to not apply these numbers like outside of the Bible in our lives in ways of like trying to understand what's going on and like predict things.
Well, that's true. I mean,
Because I see that happen a lot. People say like, "Oh, this is gonna happen for 40 days," or "That took 7." Like people try to use those numbers to make certain events now seem more significant, and it's like I don't know if that's wise.
No, it isn't, because there's nothing magical about these numbers.
No.
These numbers have symbolic value when they are in a symbolic passage. And the symbolic passage is something that God gave for us, right? But you can't just simply take the number itself and just make it some kind of magical number. And at the same time, you can't make it be something that it isn't. I think one of the most outlandish things that I had ever run across was some preacher developed some kind of very extensive system. I mean, he had them all listed, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. I mean, and he had meanings behind all those numbers. And then he said, I've got a system that you can figure out the meaning of any Bible verse in the Bible. You just simply take a look at the number itself and look at the chart and find out what the symbolism is, and that's the meaning of the verse. And so, John 3:16, well, there's 3 and there's 1 and there's 6, and and away you go. And it's kind of like, well, wait a minute. People came up with the numbering system centuries after the Bible was completed.
Yeah.
Of course, we overlooked that a little bit. So all I'm saying is that, as far as Bible numerology goes, there is something to it when you look at the symbolism of the numbers. And boy, in the book of Revelation, I mean, we see a bunch of it. But just because there's symbolism there, it doesn't mean that you can apply it all the way across the board. Paul?
That's what I was going to say. You already said. Right?
Oh, okay. Yeah, all right.
When the Bible was first written, there was no numbers.
That's right.
When we get into chapter 4, we're going to find out some numbers. Wow. So save some of this for then.
All right. Okay. Back to this? Okay, back to this. All right. So here we've got these 7 letters to the churches of Asia Minor here. Okay. And this is kind of what is in the now category. So in verse number 19, where John was told what you have seen, what is now, and what will take place later, this is what he's writing as far as what is now is concerned. Everything else, chapter 4 later on, is going to be what is going to take place later. But chapter 2 and 3 is really kind of what is now. And, when you look at these churches, and by the way, it's down on your sheet here: Ephesus, Smyrna, Pergamum, Thyatira, Sardis, Philadelphia, and Laodicea. There's the 7 right there. These were actual churches in that day. Here is a map of Asia Minor right here. You can kind of see this is, Jerusalem is down here somewhere. Rome is over here somewhere, okay? So kind of giving you some bearings of where we're at. But here is the little island of Patmos right here, which is a penal colony during John's day. And so this is where John is at, and he's receiving the visions, okay? And so here are these 7 churches, and if you think about it, if you're going to send the letters to different churches, what are you going to do? Well, you've got to send them by courier to probably the very first place it's going to come, which is Ephesus. And then you look at it, Smyrna is the closest place from there. And so if you think about traveling on foot, that's probably what you're going to do, right? Because, you've got to get somewhere. And the longer time that you spend on the road, the more dangers and more perils that you've got. From Smyrna, and I don't know how these letters were distributed, but it kind of makes sense that maybe they'd get on a boat, go up here to Pergamum, right? And then Pergamum, Thyatira, Sardis, Philadelphia, Laodicea. And so as far as the order that's given there, it's given by the Lord. And so I don't know what order they went in as far as how they took the letters and stuff. But, it kind of makes sense that maybe they followed the same pattern that the Lord gave. And maybe the reason why the Lord gave them is for that certain pattern. Okay. Now, there's going to be some people that look at these letters here, and they kind of look at it like periods of church history. And so they're going to say, okay, the Ephesian age was from this time to this time. The Smyrna age was from this time to this time, and so on and so forth. And, everybody who does this, they always want to put us in the Laodicean age. And so, we're in the last age and all these others. Do you kind of see a problem with this? Do you remember what we talked about last week is that one method of interpreting the book of Revelation was the historist method, which is that you go and you look at the different things in the book of Revelation and you try to put them into time points in history. And that's really not a very good way to view the book of Revelation, because when you do that, you're really interjecting subjectivity into it. For us to say, okay, these are different ages in which Christianity has lived, we're really assuming that we're in the last time, right? And can we really assume that? We shouldn't, because, Christians have been assuming they're in the last time
Since Jesus left.
Since Jesus left. Now I do think that the Lord is coming back very quickly. And I think that because of the things that have been going on and the prophecies have been fulfilled and so on and so forth. But at the same time, I don't know when the Lord's going to come back.
No man knows the day, only Father in heaven.
Exactly. So it could be 500 years from now. It could be 1,000 years from now. I think tomorrow is going to be closer than 5,000 years from now, but I really don't know. And neither does anybody else.
I think it's always dangerous to assume things that Scripture doesn't tell us either.
Yes.
There's nothing in this that says that it refers to that, and there's something that a lot of people like to do, which is assume things that Scripture doesn't say. And, it's very, that's where a lot of false doctrine has come from, is people assuming things that Scripture doesn't say.
I agree with that.
I think it's very dangerous.
Yeah, and so, somebody's going to be saying, okay, we're in the Laodicean church age. And so the reason why they're going to say that is because they're going to look at what the letter is to the Laodicean church, and they're going to say, oh, wow, that really matches to what I see. Okay, well, it may match what you see, but that doesn't necessarily mean that it's global.
That's kind of
across
what we
everything.
talked about last week, like our perspective, like what we see isn't necessarily like what's going on compared to like other times and like what other people are seeing.
Right. The church that person is in and other churches that person knows, the Laodicean letter may have some very strong application for. But that doesn't mean that a church on the other side of the world is facing that. As a matter of fact, a church on the other side of the world may be facing something totally different.
Right.
They may be seeing something totally different. Okay?
But
And
each
so
one has got a specific.
these letters, yes. So these 7 letters, we need to understand that these were real churches.
That's right.
And they were real people, and they had real problems, and they had real issues, and they had, so when we look at this, these letters, I would rather take it just for what it is, and that is just 7 real letters to 7 real churches describing 7 real problems.
Different problems.
Yeah.
Actually.
I think another danger about setting the day, hour, which is gonna return. What if he returns before that date? They're gonna be left behind.
Well, that's true. Yeah. If I say the Lord's come back in 2022, and he comes back in 2021, if you're waiting until 2022,
Very busy.
yeah. Okay, so these 7 letters, they all kind of follow a pattern, all right? And that is, first of all, you've got an addressee. And all of them are written to the angel of the church at, okay? All right? I'm going to talk about that a little bit more in a little bit. A little bit more in a little bit. Yeah, makes sense. Okay, also we see that in every single letter, Christ is described, and he's really described with the words of, and then the description is made. Okay? So these are the words of him who, these are the words, so Jesus is described in all these different ways. Now, all the letters have a certain assessment of Christ with the words this. I know. Okay? And so Jesus is saying, I know your deeds. I know. And so, we need to understand that Jesus, as far as being the Lord of the church, the head of the church, he does know what's going on. All the churches are going to have some sort of criticism and or commendation. Okay? There are 2 churches that there is no criticism of the Lord. Everything is fine with the churches. There's 2 churches that have really no good things for the Lord to say about them, and the other 3 are kind of a mixed bag. There's some good things, but yet some bad things too. And so when you read the letters, there's going to be some criticisms that the Lord has. There's going to be some commendations, and at the same time, the Lord is also going to have some rebukes for the churches that are having some problems. But he's also going to have some encouragements for the churches that are not having problems. And one thing that we need to understand is that the social situation that got John imprisoned on Patmos, that climate was the same climate that all the other churches were operating in. And so they were undergoing severe persecution. All right. Something else is that he always has a promised blessing to the one that overcomes. And I'll be honest with you, I read some of these promised blessings and I think, what in the world is he talking about? And, there's times that when I really read it and think about it and study it and, I think, oh, okay, well, I think this is what it could be. And then later on I come back to it and I think, what was that again? I don't know. And so if you say, what is the hidden white stone? I don't know, to tell you the truth.
Right.
Okay? All right. But there is this, and that is right here. He who has an ear, let him hear what the Spirit says to the churches. And that to me is something that's very important because, somebody could read these 7 letters to the 7 churches and, even be able to come up with all kinds of different answers and, memorize them and everything like that. But if they never just stop to think, hey, what is this and how do we apply it? Then what good is it? And so there's always towards the end of these letters, he who has an ear, Let him hear what the Spirit is saying to the churches. And by the way, as far as that theory of, these are different letters of different time periods in church history. A problem with that is that, what I believe that the church is just a local congregation, not all of Christianity. And, you can't take all of Christianity. You can't even take all of Christianity today. I mean, if you stop and think about what Christianity is today, I mean, it's all over the place, right? I mean, a couple weeks ago, there was some social studies teachers, and part of social studies in public school is to talk about different religions and everything. And so there's a man who's Muslim, and so he was coming in and he was talking to the kids about what it meant to be a Muslim and everything. And so I said, hey, if you guys want somebody to talk about Christianity, especially Baptist faith, I'm right here, And I thought they were going to, just immediately shoot me down, but they said, oh, you know what, maybe we need to think about that for next year. It's too late now. So, but anyway, so I started thinking, well, if I were to go in and talk to kids about what Christianity, I mean, because, this is, what is Christianity? There is a bunch of, wide variety. If I start out and saying, hey, what is a Christian? What is Christianity? I mean, you've got all kinds of people, So anyway, when you look at Christianity today, it's not a one thing. It's all over the place.
A lot of people probably have a different conception of it because of how different.
Yeah, and that's the way it's been all through history too. I mean, you can't say, oh, all Christianity was this way at this time, because it really wasn't. So okay, all right. Going back to this, let's take a look. Well, let's just take a look at chapter 2 and verse number 1. So, chapter 2, verse number 1, to the angel of the church in Ephesus write. And then if you look at verse number 8, to the angel of the church in Smyrna write. Verse number 12, to the angel of the church in Pergamum write. And then so on and so forth with Thyatira, Sardis, Philadelphia, and then the last church, Laodicea. And so what is this angel to the church at Ephesus, Thyatira, Pergamum, so on and so forth? Well, let's go back a little bit and let's see what John saw. We read this last week. And you look back at chapter 1, verse 12, it says, I turned around to see the voice that was speaking to me. And when I turned, I saw 7 golden lampstands. Among the lampstands was somebody like a son of man, dressed in a robe reaching down to his feet, with a golden sash around his chest. His head and hair were white like wool, as white as the snow, and his eyes were like blazing fire. His feet were like bronze glowing in a furnace, and his voice was like the sound of rushing waters. In his right hand he held 7 stars, and out of his mouth came a sharp, double-edged sword. His face was like the sun shining in all its brilliance. And when I saw him, I fell at his feet as though dead. And he placed his right hand on me and said, do not be afraid. I am the first, the last. I am the living one. I was dead, and behold, I am alive forever and ever. I hold the keys of death and Hades. Write therefore what you have seen, what is now, and what will take place later. Notice verse 20. The mystery of the 7 stars that you saw in my right hand and of the 7 golden lampstands is this. The 7 stars are the angels of the 7 churches, and the 7 lampstands are the 7 churches. Okay? And so here we've got, this is symbolic. And what I talked about last week was that this is apocalyptic literature, meaning that these are highly symbolized metaphoric visions. And so what John sees are supposed to mean something. And sometimes those things are pointed out. Sometimes we've just got to kind of go by common sense. Sometimes we have to go back to Old Testament imagery. But here we've got it labeled for us, right? I mean, when it's labeled for us, it's easy. And so what we see here is that the 7 stars are what?
Angels,
The angels of the seven churches, and the seven lampstands are what?
the churches.
The seven churches. And so these letters are written to these angels of the seven churches. Okay? So, what is that? You know? What's that? Well, the head of the church is Jesus. You know? Well, some people will say it's the pastor. Okay? And it could be something to the pastor, because when you look at the Greek word angel, the word angel really means messenger. Okay? And so, as far as the pastor or friends in faith, I view myself as being a messenger. I don't run the church. If somebody comes up and says, hey, you need to do this at Friends in Faith, I'm not in charge of Friends in Faith, right? Well, what I am in charge of is to give God's word and to try to lead people spiritually. Yes, sir.
I'm curious, there's angels of each church. Does all churches have angels?
Well, okay. I would say that, that depends. If we're going to take that and say that this word angel is really talking about a pastor, then, it kind of takes the spiritual being out of it. But I think that if we're going to say that this angel really is, that there is like a protective angel over these seven churches, that any church of Jesus Christ would fit in that mold, don't you think?
Yeah, that's kind of what I was thinking.
Yeah. And notice where it says the seven lampstands are the seven churches. One thing about the church at Ephesus, you read about it, and if they did not repent, what was going to happen in verse number 5 is that he was going to come and remove the lampstand from its place. And so, the Lord's churches are designated as far as the Lord's churches because the Lord is the head of it. And if the church doesn't follow the Lord, then the Lord doesn't recognize the church. And so with the Ephesus, if they were not going to be following the Lord, then the Lord was going to remove that designation from it. Okay? And I think you can look at these seven churches and you can see, like the Laodicean church, where it says that he is going to spew them out of his mouth, that I think that's the same type of thing. And so, Dennis, I don't know if I answered your question or not, but I sure gave a lot of words around it if I didn't.
That was unusual that, because I've never heard that before. He's writing letters to the angel of the church. And I just thought that struck me as curious.
Yeah. But even though it's written to the angel of these churches, it's about the churches.
Right.
That's obvious. When you read them, it's about the church. It's not about, the angel doing wrong things or right things, because an angel, that's not its plan or purpose, and it's not the pastor, it's the people in the church. And so that's kind of why I think that we got to go back, we got to look at that vision of Jesus, where he's got the seven churches, amongst him, and that seven stars are there, and it's the angels of them, and so there's a spiritual connection and a spiritual dimension.
The angels are like messengers.
Well,
So maybe we just don't know.
Oh,
Whether
there you go.
Whether they're a pastor or an angel watching over that church, whatever the case is, we don't know for sure, right?
Right.
Because the word means messenger, so
yeah.
messenger.
But regardless of what we don't know, what we do know is that, these are written to these seven churches. Right? Okay?
But this is given to John to send to these churches.
Right.
If it was an actual angel, why would God give the letter to John to give to the angels?
That's kind of what I was thinking
Yeah.
too. This
He would
is a
give it-
physical thing.
The angels always receive their messages straight from the Lord,
Yeah,
not from
and they're more
a
in
man.
the spiritual realm.
Right.
So maybe
Okay.
it would be that thing.
And if the word itself means messenger,
Well, yes.
why necessarily put a spiritual, angelic being label on it?
Moving on.
I won't
All
answer more
right.
questions like that.
Look at this. Christ described. Now, when you go and you look at these descriptions of Christ in these letters, for example, you take a look at, oops, sorry about that. You take a look at the letter of the church at Ephesus. It says, "These are the words of him who holds the 7 stars in his right hand and walks among the 7 golden candlesticks or lampstands." Now, where do we get that? We got that back in that
John's vision.
John's vision, right? Okay. At the same time, let's go to the one at Smyrna in verse number 8. It says, "These are the words of him who is the first and last, who has died and has come back to life." Now, where did you remember reading about that? In the vision. There in verse number 17, he said, "Do not be afraid, I am the first and last. I am the living one who is dead, and behold, I am alive forever and ever." Okay? And so, when you take a look at these descriptions of Christ, they're all going back to that vision. One, and it is the church at, I think, Philadelphia. Yeah. One is kind of stretching a little bit, but it's still there. It says, "These are the words of him who is holy and true, who holds the key of David." Now, did you read about the key of David?
Is that the same key?
What key did we read about in the vision?
Key of death and Hades.
Yeah, so, it is a key. Now, death and Hades, the key of David. I think it is because, you think about not the person David, but you think about how the covenant was made with David. And the covenant was made with David about the son of David. And the son of David, Jesus Christ, conquered death and hell. Okay? All right. So you kind of see where those descriptions come into play. Okay? And then the criticisms and the commendations, we're not going to go through each and every one of these. But like I say, you read these, and to a certain degree, they're a little bit on the, kind of strict side, if you will. But at the same time, you read some of the things that the churches were doing, and some of the things that they were doing were really bad things. A lot of these that there is criticisms to the churches has to do with Old Testament imagery. And so it may not be necessarily that these people were doing the exact same things. Like, for example, Jezebel is mentioned, Baal is mentioned, Balaam's mentioned. It's not the exact same things, but the same similar sins of Baal, Jezebel, and the Israelites are brought out. Okay?
A lot of false teaching, pagan practices.
A lot of false teachings in there. And so, one thing that we need to understand is that
Refusal to repent.
okay.
So whether to say, sorry, this
Yeah.
letter 5.
So that's in chapter 3 and verse number 1, where now this is directed, I think, to individuals. Oh, wait a minute. Well, we're thinking about two different things. I'm thinking of the church in Thyatira.
It says, remember therefore what you have received and heard, obey it and repent. But if you do not wake up, I will come back to thee, and you will not know at what time I will come to you.
Well, right. But that's not the only one where they were told to repent, too.
No, this is true.
Yeah.
This is true. Almost all of them.
Well, 2 were not. Philadelphia and Smyrna were not. Philadelphia and Smyrna, no problems. They were just enduring persecution.
Right.
Okay. All right. Anybody else got comments or questions on any of this?
So those other two were just uplifting. letters?
Of Smyrna in Philadelphia. Well, there's no criticism there. It's just, commendation. For example, at Philadelphia, he says this. He says, I know your deeds. See, I have placed an open door before you, an open door that no one can shut. I know you have had little strength, yet you have kept my word and have not denied my name. I will make those who are of the synagogue of Satan, who claim to be Jews, though they are not, but are liars, I will make them come and fall down at your feet and acknowledge that I loved you. Since you have kept my command to endure patiently, I will also keep you from the hour of trial that is going to come upon the whole world to test those who live on the earth. Okay? And so, there's not a, you're doing this wrong, repent. This is, you're doing this right, keep it up. Type thing. And when you look at the, you're doing this right, keep it up type thing, it has to do with doctrinal integrity. It has to do with not denying Jesus. It has to do with perseverance amidst trials. Mm-hmm. And I'm sure that whatever this church was going through, it must have been really hard to overcome. One church, let's see, what one is it where it talks about one who had been put to death? Smyrna?
Verse 10?
Well,
at the end of verse 10, be faithful even to the point of death.
Right.
Right.
And I'll give you a crown of life. But there's one, it's Pergamum in verse number 13. I know where you live, where Satan has his throne, yet you remain true to my name. You did not renounce your faith in me, even to the days of Antipas, my faithful witness, who was put to death in your city. And so, this is somebody in church who actually was killed because they would not deny Jesus Christ. Okay.
And they were actually had teachers of the faith in that church.
They had false teachers. There, verse 14, nevertheless, I have a few things against you. You have people there who hold to the teachings of Balaam. And so there, even though there were people that were dedicated in that church, there were some people that were not. All right. So it's 8 o'clock. You want to stop there?
Yeah.
Okay. We'll stop there. If you have other questions about the letters to the 7 churches, we'll talk about them next week. If not, we're going to bravely go on into chapters 4 and 5, and we're going to start to take a look at this, what is later, okay? And so really starting out with, in chapters 4 and 5, is a prelude to the opening of the seals, and we'll talk more about that next week. But if you want to take a look at chapters 4 and 5, we'll do that. Yeah?
Jericho was marched 7 times around as a completion of God's judgment in the city.
There we go. Another 7. And something tells me it is not the last one.
That'd be kind of neat to have a little night to talk about all the subjects.
Yeah. Well, like I said, if we want to just list the number of 7s in the book of Revelation, there's a lot of them.
What if there's 77?
There are 77s.
No, like
77s have been decreed on the Jewish people.
No, what if 7 is mentioned 70 times?
That would be something. Okay. All right. We'll just leave it at that. Sound good? Okay, let's pray. Dear Lord in heaven, thank you for everything you've given us. Thank you for your blessings, and thank you for the time in your word. And Lord, please be with your churches, and please help us here at Friends in Faith to honor you and please you and stay faithful to you, Lord. Lord, we oftentimes are sinners and fall short of your glory. But Lord, please strengthen us with your grace and your mercy, and help us to be a church that you're pleased with, a church that honors you and gives you the kind of reverence that you deserve. Lord, please forgive us of our sins and be with us as we go our way. We ask this in Jesus' name. Amen.